Imagine this. It's 2 a.m., you have something due tomorrow, and your mind is now filled with half-formed ideas that you simply cannot put together. So what you did was basically what all of us have been doing all the time. You open an LLM, type in a few words, and a clean, organized answer would then appear right in front of you in seconds. Whatever that task was, whether it's an outline, an email, or a paragraph, at an instant you would feel that what the LLM provides suddenly turns something in a mess into order. It's almost magical. And to be honest, in every single night it almost works. But here I would like to talk about the night I stopped being so sure it does. For a long time, the only question I've ever asked about AI was the same probably everyone else has been asking all the time. How good is this thing going to get, and what will it eventually replace? But a few months ago, I sat down with someone whose answer to that question stopped me from thinking this way. Her name is Irene. She's a playwright. And a few months ago, I had a chance to interview her for a project now I run on human originality in the age of AI. Somewhere in that middle of the conversation, she brought up something that has profoundly changed how I would view these tools every single day. So here's what this video really is about. What if the question we have been asking, what part of human work will AI replace, is simply the wrong question? Not wrong because the final answer is frightening, but wrong because it points our attention at the wrong direction. By the end of this video, I want to offer you the question I now ask instead. But to get there, I need to tell you what Irene showed me. And it all starts with a simple experiment you can all try yourself. Ask an AI to write you a character. I tried precisely this. I typed in Claude's chat box, "Now you are an A-star scriptwriter. Write me a few quotes on a Chinese international student. He should feel real and distinct." In a few seconds, the LLM gave me a very decent answer. The student was ambitious, a little homesick, and hardworking. Like most of the international students, this kid would also text his mother on Sundays. Every single detail reads heartfelt. Yet, when I finished reading the whole text and tried to mix the traits up to a unified image, I found I couldn't actually picture him. Together, they added up to no one in particular. This is what you would call the kind of character that could be anybody, and therefore isn't really somebody. Then I asked Irene the same question, and surprisingly, she didn't describe a student. Instead, she started making choices out loud, one after another. He could be from a large city, but she'd rather he'd come from a small town. His family could be wealthy, but an ordinary family, Irene said, probably carries more weight. And then this, I want his English to be perfect, except he has no idea how to take a bus in English. When she landed on that final detail, everything changed to me. A clear picture of the student unfolded in front of me. A specific person standing here, someone with a very particular gap between his abilities and his life, the kind of gap I could build a whole play around. Now, hearing upon this, you may think that probably a playwright is just simply better at writing than an LLM can. But to my surprise, that conclusion does not also quite align with what Irene would say next. When I asked Irene whether she would let AI to write a dialogue, she said yes. She tried it, and her review was fair. It's not bad. Pretty middle of the ground. It gives you ideas and what these people might say. That's exactly what Irene told me. And coming from someone whose profession is about writing dialogues, that is a concession. I mean, the machine's writing is already very competent, and it's only going to get more competent. So, if the difference between her character and the machine's character isn't about quality, then what can it be? That answer came from the most unexpected part of our conversation. I had assumed, like most people, I think, that the best possible use of AI is organizing our thinking. When your ideas are a mess, the machine breaks everything down, untangles them, and finally ends up with you showing a perfect picture. That seems like the whole story, right? It handles the tedious sorting, and the creation process, which we care about all along, remains untouched. So I was genuinely confused when Irene told me she refuses to use AI for precisely this. She won't let it organize her notes, nor structuring her drafts, or even brainstorm with her at all. I pushed back to her then. I said, that's the boring part, and that's precisely where you should hand your work off. Her reply was one sentence. Organization itself is the labor. When you sort through your own ideas, you're really answering one question over and over. What stays and what gets cut? And that question is never neutral because every answer to it is a small act of judgment. The idea you keep, the idea you let go, the phrasing you circle back to 3 times before you commit to it, those decisions are where your particular way of thinking actually gets exercised into real work. A writer's voice isn't something that exists first and gets organized afterward. It is built, decision by decision, out of exactly this kind of thinking. Which means the next time when you hand the machine your mess and then receive a clean outline, something has genuinely changed. We tend to treat generating ideas as the real work, and organizing them is sort of like a backstage work, the part that deserves the least amount of effort. But what we actually give away was the real work itself, because the outline now reflects the machine's judgment of what should be kept and what should be thrown away, but not ours. Say, if we do it once, it will cost us nothing. But if we do it as a habit, our work would stay perfectly competent, like that student, while gradually sounding less and less like us. In other words, it becomes what Irene called pretty middle of the ground. The same quality my AI-generated student had, believable in every detail, but ends up being no one in particular. Irene told me that she would rather call a friend and think out loud for an hour than let AI do her brainstorming. Before that conversation, I found this completely confusing, but now it really makes sense to me. But the point about this video isn't about refusing to use AI, because we use AI all the time. Irene's not an exception. She would say she uses it for long emails. She uses it for application paperwork, for hunting down resources, for transcribing interviews. You see, the same person who won't let the machine near her notes would hand in it long documents without even hesitating. At first, it looked very contradictory to me, but then she explained her reasoning. Mechanical paperwork isn't worth my labor. A form that a reviewer will skim in 10 minutes, she said, does not deserve 3 hours of her life. And when I heard that contradiction in my mind somehow dissolved itself, because I realized that both of her decisions, the tasks she hands over and the ones she refuses to, come from a single baseline in her mind. And that rule is not about the machine or whether it can do it well. By her own account, it handles dialogues decently and paperwork perfectly. The thing is doing this worth my labor, and does it make me who I am? Organizing an idea about a character is, so the work would stay untouched. Mechanical paperwork doesn't, so the machine will handle it. And here's the real catch of the point Irene has been making. Nobody else can run that decision for you. Keeping what stays and throwing out those that are redundant to your mind is completely personal to you, and you can only do the decision for yourself. The machine can't help you, nor the others. This is what originality manifests itself at the most precise form, as I've come to understand it. And this brings me back to where everything started. The question everyone keeps asking, what will AI replace? I now believe that question deserves an honest answer. This is a spectator's question. It asks about the machine's capabilities and the machine's capabilities are entirely out of our control. Whatever the answer turns out to be, your role is to wait for it. Irain's way of thinking points to a different question, and after months of thinking about it, it has become the one I now ask instead. What would I refuse to hand over, even if all those LLMs can handle it perfectly? That question isn't about the machine at all. It is about you. And unlike the first question, you already know the answer. And think about how every interaction with these tools actually begins. When Irain built her character, listen to how she talked. I want him to be from a small town. I want his family ordinary. I want his English perfect, except for one thing. And when you sit down at that prompt box, tonight you'll begin the same way. I want an outline. I want this shorter. I want this more organized. The machine generates everything that comes after these two words, but it cannot generate the two phrases themselves. The wanting, the decision about what is worth asking for and what is worth your own labor, sits permanently on our side of that screen. And that isn't about simply like something philosophical, because that is literally how the whole machine is built with. And so the LLMs will keep improving, and that part isn't a question. But what is a question is whether we keep making Irain's decision deliberately, sorting the questions. Each time, what is merely mechanical from what is actually ours, or whether we would let the line drawn for us by default and take in every single shortcut at the time. LLMs can always finish your sentence. It can never start it. I want is the only thing you can't prompt it, and everything you'd never hand over lies in these two words. Irain drew her line at her notes, and I'm still drawing mine. So before you close this video, try answering the question once, honestly. What is the one thing you'd keep for yourself, even if LLMs can handle it perfectly? See you in the next one.